In 43 years on the bench, I have watched people from every walk of life stand before me, rich and poor, educated and illiterate, young and old. I have handed down sentences that changed lives, and I have shown mercy that changed lives too. But in all that time, I had never had someone walk into my courtroom looking like they had nothing, only to discover, sitting right there in front of me, that she had once had everything. That changed on November 8th, 2024, at 9:47 inches the morning, when a homeless woman named Sarah Chen appeared before me for stealing a loaf of bread. Her story changed how I think about homelessness forever, and I think it's going to change how you think about it too. Before I tell you what happened, let me say this. If you have ever judged someone based on how they look, if you have ever walked past a homeless person on the sidewalk and assumed you already knew their story, you need to hear this, because sometimes the people who look like they have nothing are the ones who have lost the most. Hit that subscribe button before we get into it, because this story is going to challenge everything you think you know about the people living on our streets. Let me take you back to that Friday morning in November. It was cold, one of those raw New England mornings where the wind cuts right through you, no matter how many layers you're wearing. I remember shaking off my coat in chambers, going over the morning docket with my clerk, the usual mix of small claims, minor infractions, the occasional traffic case, nothing out of the ordinary. I've sat on this bench for 43 years now, and I could probably run a morning docket in my sleep at this point. There's a rhythm to it. You learn the cadence of a courtroom, the same way a surgeon learns the cadence of an operating room, or a teacher learns the cadence of a classroom full of restless kids. You learn which cases will take 30 seconds and which ones will take 30 minutes. You learn to read a room before a single word is spoken. And after 4 decades of doing this, you'd think very little could still catch you off guard. I want you to remember that, because it matters for what comes next. My clerk handed me a file, case number PVD 2024-113621, petty theft, stop and shop, amount stolen, 1 loaf of bread, valued at $3.49. The defendant was Sarah Chen, age 52, listed address none, status homeless. I looked over the citation details before court opened, the way I always do. November 4th, 2024, 6:15 inches the evening. Security footage showed a woman in worn, dirty clothing concealing a loaf of bread under her jacket. When store security confronted her, she didn't run. She didn't resist. She just stood there and started crying. The responding officer, David Martinez, wrote a brief report. Subject was cooperative, admitted to taking the bread, stated she hadn't eaten in 3 days, no priors, released on personal recognizance. I see cases like this more often than I would like to admit. Desperate people stealing food because they are hungry. It breaks my heart every single time, and after 43 years, I still haven't found a way to make that easier to sit with. When Sarah Chen walked through those courtroom doors at 9:45 that morning, I understood immediately why Officer Martinez had been gentle with her. She looked like she had been living rough for a long time. Her clothes were worn and dirty, layered on top of each other despite the cold. A winter coat far too big for her frame, the kind you get handed at a shelter, not the kind you choose for yourself. Her hair was gray, pulled back in a messy ponytail that had clearly been done in a hurry, maybe in front of a gas station bathroom mirror. Her face was weathered and lined and exhausted in a way that told you she hadn't slept properly in longer than she could remember. But it was her eyes that got me. They weren't the eyes of someone hardened by years on the street. They were intelligent, aware, and deeply, deeply sad. She carried a single plastic shopping bag that seemed to hold everything she owned in the world. She walked to the defendant's table quietly, almost apologetically, the way people walk when they've been taught by hard experience not to take up space, not to draw attention, not to be a burden on anyone. My courtroom had about 40 people in it that morning. Other defendants waiting their turn, family members in the gallery, a couple of attorneys shuffling papers, a few reporters who cover the docket for the local paper. I noticed several people glance at Sarah with that familiar mixture of pity and discomfort. That's how most of us look at homeless individuals, if we're honest about it, like a problem to be solved or a problem to be avoided. I've caught myself doing it too, in weaker moments over the years, and I'm not proud of that. It's an easy habit to fall into, looking away, and a hard one to break. I've presided over thousands of cases involving people who fell on hard times, fathers who lost jobs and fell behind on child support, veterans who came home from war and never quite found their footing again, teenagers who made one bad decision that followed them for years. Every single one of them walked through those same doors, sat at that same defendant's table, and waited to see whether the person behind this bench would see them as a case number or as a human being. I have tried for 43 years to always choose the second option, even on the mornings when I was tired, even on the mornings when the docket was long and my patience was short. Some days I have done that better than others. That morning, watching Sarah Chen walk toward the defendant's table with her plastic bag clutched to her chest, I promised myself I would do better than I had ever done before. I called the case, case number PVD 2024-113621, State of Rhode Island versus Sarah Chen, theft of property valued under $5. Sarah stood. "I'm here, Your Honor." Her voice surprised me. It was educated, clear, the voice of someone who had lived a very different life once and hadn't lost that part of herself, even after everything else had been stripped away. "Miss Chen, you're charged with stealing a loaf of bread from Stop and Shop on November 4th. How do you plead?" "Guilty, Your Honor. I took the bread. I was hungry. I'm sorry." No excuses, no elaborate story. Just the truth offered plainly, the way people offer the truth when they've stopped having the energy to dress it up. I looked at the file again. "Miss Chen, I see this is your first offense. No criminal record at all. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor. The officer's report says you hadn't eaten in 3 days. Is that true?" She nodded, and tears were already forming. "Yes, Your Honor. The shelter where I stay ran out of food 2 days before that. I had no money. I was so hungry. I took the bread. I knew it was wrong, but I was desperate." After 4 decades on the bench, you develop a sense for when someone is telling you the truth and when someone is performing for you. Sarah Chen was not performing. She wasn't trying to manipulate the court or work an angle. She was simply tired and hungry and ashamed, and none of that was an act. "Miss Chen, are you currently receiving any kind of assistance, food stamps, welfare, anything at all?" "No, Your Honor, I don't know how to apply. I tried to go to the welfare office once, but the paperwork was so complicated and I didn't have the documents they needed, and I gave up." I nodded slowly. I've seen this pattern more times than I can count. People fall through the cracks of the system, not because they don't want help, but because navigating that system requires resources they simply don't have. A permanent address, a working phone, internet access, reliable transportation. Take away any one of those things, and the whole system becomes almost impossible to access, let alone all of them at once. "Where are you staying?" "There's a women's shelter on Broad Street, Hope House. They let me sleep there most nights if they have room, but they're always full. Sometimes I sleep outside. It was 34 degrees last night." The thought of this woman sleeping outside in that cold made my chest tighten in a way I wasn't fully prepared for that morning. "Miss Chen, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Have you always been homeless?" She looked down and shook her head. "No, Your Honor. When did you become homeless?" "About 14 months ago. October of 2023. "What happened?" She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her deciding whether to answer at all. Then she took a breath, and what she told me over the next 10 minutes was one of the most heartbreaking stories I have heard in 43 years of doing this job. I was a doctor, Your Honor, a cardiothoracic surgeon. I worked at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston for 23 years. The courtroom went completely silent. Every person in that gallery turned to look at her. A cardiothoracic surgeon, one of the most demanding, most prestigious specialties in all of medicine. Years of training, years of sacrifice, a level of skill that takes decades to build. She continued, her voice shaking now. I had a good life, Your Honor. A beautiful home in Cambridge, a daughter who was in college, a career I loved. I helped people, I saved lives. I was somebody. She paused, past tense, was somebody. In March of 2022, my daughter Emily was diagnosed with leukemia. She was 19. A sophomore at Brown University, right here in Providence. Bright, beautiful, her whole life ahead of her. Tears were streaming down her face now, and she made no effort to hide them. I took a leave of absence from work to care for her. The treatment was aggressive. Chemotherapy, radiation, then a bone marrow transplant. I spent every single day with her, held her hand through every procedure, told her she was going to beat this. She paused again, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She didn't beat it. Emily died on August 15th, 2023. She was 20 years old. The courtroom was silent except for Sarah's quiet crying, and I noticed several people in the gallery wiping their own eyes. My clerk had gone very still beside me. After Emily died, I couldn't go back to work. I couldn't focus. I couldn't operate. My hands would shake. I would see patients and think of Emily. I took more time off. Then I started having panic attacks in the operating room. I couldn't do my job anymore. She took a shaky breath before continuing. The hospital was understanding at first, but after 6 months, they had to let me go. I had savings. I thought I would be okay, but the medical bills from Emily's treatment kept coming. Insurance covered a lot, but not everything. Experimental treatments, special medications. It added up fast. I spent everything trying to save her. And after she died, I spent what was left on grief counseling and medication and just trying to survive. By October of 2023, I'd lost my house, lost my car. I moved to Providence to be closer to Brown, where Emily had been happy. I don't really know why. It just felt right at the time. I stayed in a cheap motel first, then shelters. Then I ran out of money completely and ended up on the street. She looked up at me with those intelligent, broken eyes. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon, Your Honor. I have a medical degree from Harvard Medical School. I've performed over 3,000 heart surgeries. I've published research papers. I've taught residents how to hold a scalpel. And now I steal bread to survive. That's what grief and medical debt can do to a person. I sat there for a moment, genuinely trying to process what I had just heard. A Harvard-educated surgeon, a woman who had saved thousands of lives with her own 2 hands, reduced to stealing a $3 loaf of bread because there was nothing else left to do. Miss Chen, do you have any family, anyone who could help you? She shook her head. Emily was my only child. Her father, my ex-husband, died in a car accident when she was 10. I have a sister in California, but we haven't spoken in years. It's just me. I looked at this woman, this brilliant, accomplished, devastated woman who had lost her daughter, her career, her home, and somewhere along the way, her sense of who she even was, and who was now standing in my courtroom for stealing a loaf of bread because she was hungry. Miss Chen, I need to ask you something. You said you're a cardiothoracic surgeon. Do you still hold your medical license? She looked genuinely surprised by the question. I think so. I never formally surrendered it. I just stopped practicing. Why do you ask that, you might be wondering? Because I'm wondering whether you've ever considered trying to return to medicine. She let out a small, sad laugh. Your Honor, I've been homeless for over a year. I have no address, no phone, no computer. I haven't practiced in 2 years. My skills are outdated. No hospital would hire me. And even if one would, I don't have the mental stability to operate on someone's heart right now. I barely have the stability to get through a single day. Fair points, every one of them. But something about this case felt different to me. Something told me this woman deserved more than a routine dismissal and a trip back out to the same cold street she'd walked in from. Miss Chen, I'm going to do something a little unusual. I'm going to continue this case for 2 weeks. I'm not finding you guilty today. I'm giving you 2 weeks. She looked utterly confused. Your Honor, I don't understand. I'm giving you 2 weeks to start putting your life back together, or at least to start trying, because I do not believe that stealing a loaf of bread should be your legacy, not when you've saved thousands of lives with your own hands. I turned to my clerk. Margaret, please contact the Providence Community Health Center. Ask for Dr. Patricia Morrison, the director. Tell her I'm personally requesting an urgent meeting regarding a potential physician candidate. Sarah was staring at me like she couldn't quite believe what was happening in front of her. Your Honor, what are you doing? I'm giving you a chance, Miss Chen. Dr. Morrison runs a community health center that serves low-income patients. They're always looking for good doctors. And in my experience, they're understanding about doctors who've faced hardship. I'm going to ask her to meet with you. But, Your Honor, I'm homeless. I'm not mentally stable right now. I can't. Can you diagnose a heart condition? She blinked. Yes, of course. Can you read an EKG? Yes. Can you advise a patient on their cardiac health? Yes. But then you can help people. Maybe not in an operating room right now, but you can help. And helping people might just help you heal. Tears were pouring down her face by this point. Your Honor, I haven't been treated with this much kindness in over a year. People look at me like I'm garbage, like I'm invisible. You're the first person who's seen me as a human being in so long. My own voice was thick when I answered her. You are a human being, Miss Chen, a brilliant, accomplished human being who has been broken by unimaginable grief. But broken doesn't mean worthless, and homeless doesn't mean hopeless. I'm also going to contact Hope House, the shelter where you stay, and ask them to reserve a bed for you for the next month while you get back on your feet. And I'm going to personally make sure you're connected with Rhode Island Social Services so you can get food assistance, mental health counseling, and whatever else you need. Sarah was sobbing at this point, full, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Why are you doing this for me? Because it's the right thing to do, because you stole that bread because you were hungry, not because you're a criminal. And because after 43 years of doing this job, I still believe everyone deserves a second chance, especially someone who spent her entire adult life dedicated to saving others. I brought down my gavel. This case is continued to November 22nd, 2024. Ms. Chen, I expect you to appear at that hearing, having met with Dr. Morrison, and having started the process of rebuilding your life. If you do that, I will dismiss all charges. Do you understand? She could barely get the words out through her tears. Yes, Your Honor, thank you so much. If you're still with me and you believe that people deserve a second chance, take a second right now and subscribe. This story only gets more remarkable from here, and I don't want you to miss where it goes. What happened over the next 2 weeks genuinely surprised even me. And I've seen a lot of things surprise me in this courtroom over the decades. I called Dr. Patricia Morrison myself that same afternoon and explained Sarah's situation in detail. Dr. Morrison was skeptical at first, understandably. A homeless surgeon with no recent clinical practice sounded on paper like a significant risk to take on, but she agreed to meet with Sarah, and I respected her for that willingness alone. That meeting happened 3 days later. Sarah showed up at the community health center, still in worn clothes, still looking rough around the edges, but she brought something with her that Dr. Morrison hadn't expected at all, her curriculum vitae. Sarah had been carrying it this whole time, folded carefully inside that plastic bag with the rest of her possessions. Her entire professional history was in there. Harvard Medical School, Massachusetts General Hospital, thousands of surgeries performed, research publications, teaching awards, all of it documented and preserved, carried through shelters and cold nights and everything else, like it was the last piece of who she used to be that she refused to let go of. Dr. Morrison called me after that meeting, and she was crying on the phone. She said, "Do you realize who this woman is? She literally co-wrote one of the textbooks we used to teach cardiac surgery in my residency program. She is a legend in her field, and she has been sleeping on the streets of this city." Within a week, Dr. Morrison had offered Sarah a position, not as a surgeon, not yet, maybe not ever again, but as a consulting physician for cardiac patients, reviewing complex cases, advising on treatment plans, and teaching some of the younger doctors coming up through the health center. The pay wasn't much, $45,000 a year, a fraction of what she had once earned as a surgeon at a major Boston hospital. But it was a start, and more than that, it was a door opening back into a life she had thought was closed to her forever. The health center also connected Sarah with a trauma counselor who specialized in grief work. Sarah started therapy 3 times a week. For the first time since Emily's death, she began processing that loss in a healthy way, rather than simply trying to survive it 1 hour at a time. Hope House extended her stay indefinitely, and once a steady paycheck started coming in, Sarah was able to move into a small studio apartment about 6 weeks later. Her own address, for the first time in over a year. On November 22nd, Sarah appeared back in my courtroom for the continued hearing. She looked different, not completely transformed, not some overnight miracle, but different in ways that mattered. Her clothes were clean, her hair was washed and neatly styled. Her face looked less exhausted, less defeated. She stood a little straighter than she had 2 weeks before. Ms. Chen, I've received updates from both Dr. Morrison and Hope House. It seems you've been working hard these past 2 weeks. She smiled, and it was a real smile, the first one I had seen from her. Yes, Your Honor, I've been working at the Community Health Center. It's been wonderful, challenging but wonderful. And how are you doing personally? I'm in therapy. It's hard talking about Emily, about losing her, but it's helping. I'm starting to heal. I nodded. Ms. Chen, in light of your progress and your cooperation, I am dismissing all charges against you. This case is closed. Relief washed visibly over her face. Thank you, Your Honor. Before you go, I want to ask you something. That day you stole the bread, were you really that desperate? She nodded. Yes, Your Honor, I was starving. I felt like I was disappearing, like I had already died and nobody had noticed. And now, she took a breath, now I feel like I'm coming back to life, like maybe I can be Dr. Sarah Chen again. Maybe not exactly the same as before, but something. 6 months later, Sarah called my chambers and asked if she could stop by. I said yes, of course. She walked in looking like a completely different person than the woman who had stood before me that November morning. Professional clothes, hair styled, confident posture. But more than any of that, she looked alive. Her eyes weren't dead anymore. She told me she had been promoted at the health center and was now seeing patients directly, conducting full cardiac consultations, and teaching medical students from Brown University who rotated through the clinic. She had also started a support group for parents who had lost children, meeting every Thursday evening at a church in Providence. 15 parents attended regularly. Sarah told me that helping them was helping her heal in a way that nothing else had. Your Honor, I need to tell you something. That day in court, when you didn't just dismiss my case and send me away, when you actually saw me as a person, as a doctor, as someone worth saving, that changed everything for me." She wiped her eyes. I had given up, completely given up. I was just waiting to die out on the street. But you reminded me that I was still Dr. Sarah Chen, that losing Emily didn't erase everything I had accomplished, that I could still help people. She handed me an envelope. "This is for you." I opened it. Inside was a check for $3.49, the exact cost of the bread. "I can finally pay for what I took," she said. "It's taken me 6 months to save up enough to feel like I could afford to give this away, but I wanted you to have it, to close that chapter." I looked at this woman, this surgeon, who had fallen so far and climbed her way back up one impossible day at a time, and I was so proud of her I could hardly speak. "Miss Chen, I can't accept this. Use that $3.49 to buy bread for someone else who's hungry. Pay it forward." She smiled. "I already do, Your Honor. Every Saturday I volunteer at a food bank, and every person I serve, I remember exactly what it felt like to be so hungry I would steal. And I treat every single one of them with the dignity I wish I had received when I was the one standing on the streets." Sarah Chen is still working at the Providence Community Health Center today. She has been there for over a year now. She has helped hundreds of cardiac patients, many of them low income, some of them formerly homeless themselves. She is currently mentoring a young resident at Brown who wants to specialize in cardiology, passing along, decades later, the exact same knowledge Harvard once gave to her. Sarah will probably never perform surgery again. The trauma runs too deep, the anxiety too severe, and she has made peace with that. But she is saving lives in a different way now, through teaching, through counseling, through simple, everyday care. Here is what I learned from Sarah's case. After 43 years of sitting on this bench and thinking I had seen just about everything a courtroom could teach me. Homelessness isn't always what you assume it is. It isn't always addiction or mental illness or a string of poor choices, though of course sometimes it is those things too, and those people deserve compassion just as much, but sometimes it's grief. Sometimes it's medical debt. Sometimes it's a perfect storm of tragedy, one loss after another, that dismantles a person's entire life in the space of a single year. The woman I saw stealing bread that cold November morning had a Harvard medical degree. She had saved thousands of lives. She had stood at the top of one of the most demanding professions in the world. And grief, plain and simple, combined with the crushing weight of medical debt, had reduced her to sleeping on the streets of Providence. We need to remember that every single homeless person we pass on the sidewalk is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's friend, and that the overwhelming majority of them had a whole life before they ended up out there. A life that looked nothing like the one strangers assume for them at a glance. Sarah taught me to look closer, to ask questions instead of assuming answers, to see the person standing in front of me, and not just the problem I thought I was looking at. I think about all the other Sarahs I never got the chance to ask. In 43 years, I have sentenced people, fined people, and yes, dismissed charges for people based only on the file in front of me and the 2 or 3 minutes it takes to get through a routine case. I wonder now, looking back, how many of those files belonged to a former teacher, a former nurse, a former engineer, someone who had simply run out of road after one tragedy too many. I will never know most of those answers. That's part of what makes Sarah's case sit with me the way it does. She is the one story out of thousands where I happened to ask one more question than usual, and it happened to unlock everything. I don't say that to take credit. I say it because it terrifies me a little how close I came to never asking at all. That's really the heart of what I want to leave you with today. It doesn't take much. It didn't take a grand gesture or an extraordinary amount of resources to change the direction of Sarah Chen's life. It took one extra question, one phone call to a colleague, willing to take a chance. One shelter bed held open for a few extra weeks. None of it was complicated. What made the difference was simply refusing to let a person disappear into a file number. To everyone listening to this, I want to ask you something directly. The next time you see a homeless person on the street, don't look away. Don't assume you already know their story, because the odds are very good that you don't. Maybe smile. Maybe say hello. Maybe just remember for one moment that they are a human being fighting a battle you cannot see and probably cannot imagine. And if you are ever in a position to help, help. Donate to shelters. Volunteer at food banks. Support the programs in your community that help homeless individuals get back on their feet, because those programs are often running on nothing but goodwill and a shoestring budget, and they need every bit of support they can get. Sometimes all a person needs is one single individual who is willing to believe they are worth saving. Sarah Chen was worth saving, and so is every person living on our streets tonight. Before I go, I want you to do something for me. If this story moved you, if it changed even a little bit how you think about homelessness, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Let people know that behind every homeless person we pass by is a story we don't know anything about. Leave a comment and tell me about a time someone helped you, or a time you helped someone else, because this world needs more stories of compassion in it, not fewer. Thank you for watching, thank you for caring, and thank you for remembering that everyone, absolutely everyone, deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter what they are wearing or where they slept the night before. Until next time, I'll leave you with this. The measure of a society is how it treats those who have fallen. And sometimes the people who look like they have nothing at all are the ones who have lost the most.